Hi guys, so recently enough, very recently in fact, I'd introduced this notion of the interstice. And by interstice, I mean these little bubbles of experience that open up a possibility of bridging the NI world and the external world. The NI world being dominated by what I've been calling oceanic experience, the fundamental backdrop of the experience of the NI dominant, where all is flow, all is wavy, nothing is a straight line, nothing begins at a particular point and ends at another point, everything is folded into every other thing, which is essential to preserve for the sake of not only developing your NI, but feeling like you're living authentically as an NI dominant, not becoming severed from the possibility of that experience. And at the same time, the external world, which is more regimented, which is more like, obviously in an imagistic kind of metaphorical sense, organized in terms of building blocks, organized in terms of straight lines, cause and effect, mechanisms, instrumentality, and so on. So the oceanic and the regimented, very different modes of organizing experience. And I was saying that it's possible to train oneself to become more perceptive when it comes to the appearance of these interstices, which are kind of like, sometimes, honestly, I think they're kind of fortuitous, like lucky coincidences that allow the two modes of organizing experience to have, meeting points. And that might not last for a long time, but there's just these are kind of windows of opportunity. This is what I'm going to be talking about. They're windows of opportunity where it is possible with an oceanic energy to impact the world of regimentedness. So the point is not to think that the external world ought to become oceanic. That's just not possible. That's not how the external world is organized. The point is also not to say that NI ought to become regimented, because that's the best way to become not just alienated from the external world, but from yourself, to lose your sense of self, to lose your sense of authenticity, and possibly lose your mind. Because your identity is inevitably forged in part by your fundamental experience, and your most fundamental experience is the oceanic nature of the NI backdrop. So if there is a way to identify particular locations in that background, those bubbles, they're not really bubbles, they're more like almost fissures. They're like openings where interstices, where you can envision a way of touching the external world from the perspective of oceanic experience in a way that's key to growth, that's key to improving your self-esteem and feeling like you're making a difference in external reality, transcending severance by the same token and realizing a fully accomplished flourishing life, right? The most ideal flourishing life for an NI dominant is clearly a life that does not renege on authenticity of NI, the oceanic NI experience, whilst making positive change in external reality, which is itself not oceanic. So, how can I tell when across the day, whether I'm at work or somewhere else, I'm encountering an interstice? Right? If this whole notion of an interstice is to actually be useful, is to actually have practical value, we can't just remain at the level of the theoretical. At the same time, if things were that easy, I could just give you a solution and all INFJs and INTJs would suddenly, realize that they're all having great flourishing lives, and I wouldn't have to make videos or write books or anything like that. Everyone would be doing great and would be super accomplished and super happy about that. So it's not like it's super easy, but it's still already useful to add that notion to your repertoire of words about the NI dominant experience, to add that to your vocabulary, because your vocabulary, your repertoire of words informs your experience by the same token. There's always a feedback loop involved here, which is a point I make a great deal in my latest book, The Infinite Soul. So it's not like we perceive, suddenly we're looking around us, whether we're at the office or we're in a park, we're in the city, or we're at a family gathering or whatever. It's not like suddenly we see that there's a fissure that opens up, right? It's not like we're having these illusions or hallucinations. Usually the way that you can detect it is by paying attention to your energy levels. The typical energy levels of an INI dominant are kind of distinctive. They're kind of easy to recognize. In a sense, if I might use myself as an example, they're kind of reflected by what I project in my videos, I think. It's like an INI dominant rarely comes across as like super hyper. They never come, and again, leaving aside questions of, high anxiety and depression can certainly happen, but let's just leave that aside, control for it. They're never completely kind of downbeat and not interested and kind of feeling dead inside. Again, this idea of the oceanic experience is reflected in a kind of oceanic energy. It's like we're floating, so often our level of energy is just, it's not that it's stable, there's like a slight fluctuation. It's not big waves and like big dips. It's just like it's like more like little wavelets. But sometimes there is a surge. And I think that a lot of the time, the issue that INI dominants have is being able to locate those surges and knowing what to do with them. Now, those surges, there might only be one during the day in the midst of this just fairly predictable landscape of wavelets. There might be two, there might be three, but again, these might be kind of restricted in time, right? These are interstices. So what is telling us that an interstice in the fabric of external reality is opening up to allow the flow of like what you could describe as NI water coming in and making an impact. These interstices are, their presence is not visible in any direct sense, but it's usually made manifest by a surge in energy. Because the NI energy in a way is liberated and allowed to flow in. So the question becomes what to do with that energy. What to do with that. And I think the issue with a lot of NI dominants is they don't really know what to do with it because they've become so used to thinking in terms of the regimented world of organizing experience, because this is what we're born within, this is what society teaches us, this is how society molds us. We have this sense that the best way to be productive is to kind of have this constant level of productiveness across the day, right? Okay, so I start, say, work at 8 a.m., finish work at 6 p.m., and being productive is just having this like relatively constant level of productive capacity across the day. Well, often it turns out that's the worst way of thinking about it for NI dominance. It's the worst way of thinking about it because that's the best way to regiment NI instead of keeping the two worlds separate and using the connective tissue of interstices to make a difference. So for example, in my everyday life at the workplace, I've really observed that about myself. I've never been happier and more productive, making more of a difference at work and being more valued as an employee, and really also feeling like I'm realizing something, that I'm looking forward to something, like I'm coming closer to my vision, then when for most of the day I'm kind of like taking a seat, sitting back and relaxing. That doesn't mean I'm not working, but I'm not necessarily forcing myself to be super productive. I'm not forcing myself with coming up with great ideas. Don't force it. Just sit back, do the things with your level of engagement that feels natural to you, and just stay on the watch. Stay on the lookout. This is an important question for these surges of energy. And when there's a surge of energy, it might last for a moment. Maybe someone says something during a meeting and you experience it. And if you feel like, ooh, I have an idea, share it. If you have an idea that you're at work, you're in front of your desk, and you're at your desk, in front of your computer, pardon me, and you experience this surge, just put it down, even if it lasts for just a little while. Because not only will that be possible to exploit it further later, but you'll be going home thinking, I took advantage of these interstices. In fact, I might feel like I'm not making a huge difference, but I'm already starting to connect NI and external reality. We'll continue in the next video with this because it's a very difficult topic to explore in one video. Don't forget, guys, my 2 books on the INFJ, The Infinite Soul, INFJ Life in the Modern World, on how to lead a happy, fulfilled, and productive life as an INFJ in the world today. This is the book to get. If you want to know more about this, check the reviews, link is below. And The Ecstatic Soul, its predecessor, the deepest investigation of the INFJ mind you will find online, without exception. Check it out at the link below. And as usual, guys, Patreon is the lifeblood of my channel. I really, really need your support. So consider joining me. I get access to bonus content and the community, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.